While I'm anxious to get back to Tony Stark on screen, this is the film I've been most excited to watch, thanks to all the fun hype around Joe Johnston's 2011 MCU timeline expansion, Captain America: The First Avenger. The noir feel and color grading made this whole experience stand out, and a part of me wishes the entire franchise took place in this time period. I'll miss this installment moving forward, but we still have a long and growing list of movies to break down from the Marvel catalog. The timestamps for each sequence can be found in the comment section for your viewing pleasure. Now, let's begin. We start, as always, with a focus on our protagonist, specifically their personality, their inner conflict, and their situation. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents locate the frozen remains of Captain America. Then we go back in time to when Red Skull obtained the Tesseract, as Steve Rogers is deemed unfit for service during World War II. Next, we examine where, why, and how our protagonist exists in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Steve is tortured with war propaganda, urging him to act on civic duty. But he's defenseless in a fight in a tougher world, and hopeless in love in a taller world. While Howard Stark combines classic Americana with the technology of tomorrow. Then a brief event happens, one that's never happened before. It's destined to lead all the characters away from their status quo. Someone with higher authority than a recruitment officer hears what Steve has to offer, which leads us to examine the effect of that something new to the status quo, specifically what's different now and what remains the same. Dr. Erskine inquires about info that does not show up on medical charts. Then he allows Steve to serve as part of a classified project. We move along to the discovery that things are less than ideal, or else we explore how badly things are. Both scenarios are common. Red Skull manages to siphon power from the Tesseract, while Steve falls way behind in tryouts for the project. Next, our characters dedicate their effort to a specified goal, and this is always narrower in scope than what the third act will demand. Steve takes the most direct and logical approach to the objective, and demonstrates a high sense of duty without thought to his own safety. Then we run through a brief checklist of the main story elements that we can expect during this journey. The history and origin of Red Skull, Erskine's research and progress, Steve's private mission to stay a good man, and Red Skull's quest for ultimate dominance. Which brings us to the brief event that launches our characters into the wild jungle of the second act. It's also called the oh shit moment. Dr. Zola plays along with Red Skull's delusion, empowering an absolute madman. Oh shit. We follow our characters as they discover the new rules and expectations of their journey. These are always distinct to the narrative at play. Steve grapples with his place in the classified project, and life in general, really, as Agent Carter leads him deeper into government secrecy, and Howard makes a second attempt to bring tomorrow's technology into today. Next, our characters showcase their ability to grow and progress, and this is typically an external or physical beat rather than internal or emotional. Steve voluntarily endures the agony of the transformation, so desperate to serve, and Erskine produces his first perfect specimen. Then our characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. A Hydra spy kills Erskine and takes the serum, robbing Steve of his mentor and possible laboratory siblings. We endure the anxiety as our characters face an escalation of problems and complications. Steve taps all new, untested abilities to keep up with the killer. The spy drops Hydra's name and sinister warning, while batshit crazy Red Skull kills Nazi generals and goes rogue. Then it's revealed that the serum might be unproducible without Erskine. Next, our characters evolve internally or emotionally, and they do this by using elements of the plot or story which they've gathered and learned so far. Steve's desperation to serve places him in a mascot costume for government bonds, and he learns to perform the job proudly as patriotism swarms around him. Then our journey-weary characters come to terms with their ongoing struggles. Moments and elements of the first act are used to gauge their progress. Steve realizes his Act 1 dream of being overseas with soldiers, but the Act 1 bullying returns when he's mocked and ridiculed by battle-traumatized men. Then Act 1 bestie Bucky goes missing after a Hydra attack, which results in a brief event that strikes at our protagonist's core conflict. Steve vows to enter the action and rescue Bucky, and Carter offers to help, and there's no turning back from here. We receive needed answers alongside our characters, which relate to both their external journeys and their internal conflicts. Carter and Howard anoint Steve as a good man, with their borderline treasonous cooperation. Then he infiltrates a Hydra base with all the ease of a superhero. Next, our characters complete their narrow scope objective, yet discover that their victory is shallow or altogether meaningless and must complete a wider scope objective. Steve finds and frees the captives, but Bucky isn't among them. Then he fights through a whole wave of henchmen, but Red Skull recognizes that kind of raw power. Then our characters face an existential conflict that wounds their sense of self and identity or their physical journey. Steve finds Bucky in horrible shape from torture and who knows what else, and the building self-destructs around them, yet really super slowly. Then Red Skull hypes up their shared superiority, as Nazis are wont to do, so he trusts and believes and makes a leap of faith. We celebrate with our protagonist in light of an undeniable win, which is always related to the rebirth in some way. Steve leads the captives back to American care, and Phillips refuses to discipline him for his desertion, which earns the respect of the soldiers and general hierarchy, plus the fluttering heart of Agent Carter, because Steve done really good. Next, our characters suffer a grand loss. This is always connected to their newfound inability to quit their journey. Steve taps a few of the captives to re-enter hostile territory, and Bucky kinda sorta jinxes himself, if I'm being honest. Howard kinda sorta blows himself up, then Steve unintentionally hurts Carter and derails their budding romance. Then we experience a thematic freefall, as the main story elements are ramped up and thrown into upheaval. Steve agonizes about being a soldier, but not that kind of soldier. Howard outfits Captain America with his signature look and weapon. Then we're treated to a rock and roll montage of gunfire and explosions and American excellence, which forces us into a brief event that robs our protagonist of seemingly any hope of success. Red Skull suffers another setback and applies brutal pressure to his henchmen. We watch our characters realize that they cannot return to their first act selves, and they turn to face the wider scope objective. Steve targets Dr. Zola as the next domino to fall. Then Bucky supposedly gives his all to the mission, but social media is horrible for keeping spoilers under wraps, so I know he only fell into a future movie. And Phillips questions Zola, only to receive an ominous and scary warning about what's to come. Next, our characters use the major swings of the story and their personal journeys to move towards the climax. Red Skull ramps up Hydra's army and power, as Steve grapples with grief and survivor's guilt and the side effects of the serum. Then another new global threat rises out of Europe, and Captain America charges in to infiltrate another Hydra base. Then the final confrontation plays out between our protagonist and characters against the antagonistic force. Steve confronts the evil version of his transformation, The squad repels in through the windows and joins the gunfight, while the rest of the military storms the front door. Then Steve fends off a lot of action filler to finally confront Red Skull a third and final time, which culminates in a brief moment where our protagonist finally, and oftentimes metaphorically, overcomes their place in the Act 1 status quo. Steve refuses the future that Red Skull proposes, and accidentally breaks the Tesseract case, trying to take him down. We experience the direct aftermath of the climax. This can give our characters a moment to reflect on the situation, or else wind down the action with a coda. Tesseract in hand, Red Skull transcends into the heavens, and, most importantly, away from Earth. Then Steve gives his all to save New York and countless American lives. Next, we touch base with additional characters, typically to contrast them against the new status quo. The squad mourns the death of their newfound leader. Howard retrieves the Tesseract, but not Captain America. Then Phillips and Carter watch their classified project get shut down. Then we conclude with a tight focus on our protagonist, specifically to contrast them against how we met them at the opening. Steve wakes up in the modern year of 2011, and he's wrangled under control by Nick Fury. And there you have it. Joe Johnston's 2011 timeline expansion, Captain America: The First Avenger, adheres perfectly to the 29-point story structure every step of the way, and it proves how many ways an origin story can unfold. Now, let's move on from an action noir set in the 40s to a horror noir set in the 60s. Join me next time for Edgar Wright's 2021 horror mindbender, Last Night in Soho. As always, thank you so much for your time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and consider commenting on and sharing this video to help the channel find its audience. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll talk at you next time.